Well, to start with, shamanism is such a wide perspective of different teachings. So it's quite specific. The way I worked was quite specific to South America, where I spent a lot of time. But shamanism in general is healing. So it's the knowledge of how to do this, firstly, with aspects of yourself and your immediate community, and then how to apply that knowledge in a wider perspective. So I worked with South American shamans.
I think you were in northern Peru.
Yeah, northern Peru and on the border to Brazil.
Yeah.
And I worked in that specific culture, which is wonderful because it's a mixture of native South American culture with the influence of the West, because of course South America has been colonized for hundreds of years now, so the European perspective of the world is also present in the native culture. So basically, I didn't know anything because I'm not from South America, but I had a strong connection to the people and nature, to the forest, to the Amazon forest, and just the feeling of the place spoke deeply to my heart. So, I went there not to study shamanism or to do anything specific. I went there as a marine biologist to work to help save the environment, basically.
Yes, yes.
So that was my...
So you have a fascination with nature.
Totally.
Yeah.
And that was my, initial reason for being there.
Yeah.
After a while, I understood that, as everyone understands, that, whatever your passion is, it's also your path. So, and you have to go deeper. It's not enough just to save the world. You have to also look at what is creating the disharmony in the world within yourself. So that is what a
you have to save yourself
exactly.
too.
Exactly. And that is what a death rebirth experience is. The death is basically the death of what the ego or the mind believes to be important. And the rebirth is being born again into the wider perspective of reality, what it is to be a human being, but not focused on yourself, but focused as part of nature, as part of the wholeness that is nature. And that was my experience. In a personal sense, it was very painful because I think every human being likes to hold on to little pictures about themselves and what they believe to be true and what they feel and what they think. And to let go of all those things sounds easy. But
what forced you to let go?
Well, there was no choice, really. Because when you live with real people, you have to be real. And native people, they live in a very simple, quite real environment, and they have to be themselves. They can't be something else because that's a way to survive in the rainforest. And I realized that I needed to communicate my depth to the people and not just I'm here to save the rainforest or I'm here to help you. I had to see the deeper perspective of why am I here in the middle of the rainforest. It's not even the place I was born or grew up in. What brought me here? And I understood, and also it was explained to me that I'm there in the rainforest. I feel like I'm there today to help come to some sort of understanding about myself rather than try to save the people. And the understanding was, how can I bring that native knowledge that I could see and I could feel into the perspective of the Western world. So I had to experience that within myself, to let go of the social ideas and to the projections that I had and to the belief systems and the addictions to fear. That is one big thing that Western people, don't understand. But we live in a very fear-based culture, where we are conflicting with the laws of nature all the time to support the idea of who we are within that little context of the Western culture. And I believe that we're much more. And I needed to see that.
So you had to let go of your survival fear.
Survival fear, and the fear of opening up and being intimate with nature and being close to the forces of nature without, hiding behind a mask. And people when they go into a rainforest where there is all sorts of creatures and dangers, real dangers, you know.
And there's no silence.
And
you
there
write
is no
in your
silence.
book. It's so noisy.
Musically noisy.
You cannot escape the noise.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, every animal is singing a song. Every insect is, you know, alive with energy, and even the feeling of nature is alive with such ecstatic energy. It's difficult to hide behind your mind pictures. You know, to be partaking in what's going on, you need to be real. You need to be open, and in the beginning, that was very difficult for me because I love nature and I studied nature, but I was not able to approach it in the way that native people showed to be so easy and so beautiful to me. You know, how they walked, how they related to everything around them. I just couldn't do that within myself in a real sense. I could pretend that I was, you know, whoever in harmony with nature, but the reality was I was looking out. You know, is there a snake? Is there scorpions? Is there this? Is there that? You know, because you know, that's what the mind does. It's afraid of anything that it doesn't understand or can't control, and you can't control nature.
I saw a few years ago a movie. I don't know if you saw it. It was called Emerald Forest, and it was about a family, an American family. They moved, but he was transferred to Brazil, to the rainforest, to build, I think it's called dam, water dam. And they had a little boy. And the tribes in the rainforest were observing what they were doing. And they felt so sorry for this little boy. So they kidnapped him.
Wow.
Because they thought he needs to grow up in nature. So they kidnapped him, and he grew up in nature, and there was this scene where the boy was about 12 years old, and he had to go through an initiation. And he had to dive down into a pool of in a pond and get something and do all kinds of things. And what was so touching for me was the mother, I mean the adopted mother, stood there and said to him, "I will never see my little boy again," which meant you are not allowed to come back as a boy. You are only allowed to come back into this tribe as a grown-up.
Yes.
And I think we are missing something like that in our culture.
Totally. I believe that we act as children, you know, not spoiled children, towards nature and towards just the beauty of living. And I think that's what tribal people have, that they haven't lost, and that is what we can learn from, how to look at rituals and initiations in a way where they are useful and sacred and create a possibility for us to move beyond certain limitations into a new perspective. And that is what initiation is. And as you say, you know, we can grow into being fully part of the community, whichever community we live in, and be productive and useful and part of that joy. Rather than, you know, always wanting to take everything away from nature so that we support our selfish needs. That sounds like a very interesting film.
Yes.
Really?
If you haven't seen it, yes, you probably would like it. So you have such a passion, I mean, comes across in your book for true nature, you know, in the aspect of life and Mother Earth, and also the spiritual realms. And how can you just tell us? I don't remember now how much you said in the first interview. How you come to realize true nature? What woke you up?
Yes, I think nature is something that we, you know, all love and feel at home and relate to in a way that is universal. And I think that's a beautiful thing, because it takes us beyond our differences. You know, when anyone looks at a sunset or looks at the beautiful ocean or mountains, you know, we feel a connection to the world that is very difficult to, you know, say I'm this or I'm that. It's just universal. So I feel that is something that children love. You know, they love nature, and it's a pity in the Western world that we are so far removed from the natural laws of nature and how to do things in harmony with nature. So for me, my teaching is to bring that important realm into spirituality, because it is part of spirituality. You know, when you let go of the way the mind controls perspectives and the way the mind likes to see things, then we become more natural. We become ourselves. And when we become more natural, we are much more able to understand how nature is a teacher. You know, every aspect of nature brings some sort of quality that can be part of who you are. And this is, for me, you know, a very, very important part of the teaching, and especially in children.
I think you had a grandmother who was teaching you
Exactly.
nature, wasn't it?
Exactly.
I had the same grandmother.
Exactly, and that was, this is the reason why I have the love for nature, because from a very early age I was shown in a real sense the value of nature and how to go back to nature when things were disharmonious within me. So this is always what I did. You know, if there was a conflict in the family, or if there was something that created disharmony around me, I would always go to nature, sit under a tree, or I'd just lie in the garden, or do something where, you know, that harmony in nature created a more balanced perspective about the whole thing for me. Just being present to nature. And my grandmother was definitely, you know, the main influence to allow me to understand that not only do you have to relax in nature and come back to harmony with yourself in nature, but also that you can be active in utilizing the natural forces in nature to heal and to change aspects that we believe that we can only do by ourselves. And this is what I was taught in the Amazon forest. I was taught how to use natural remedies to cleanse the body, and how to let go of certain blocks in the body. For example, fear that somehow pollutes the liver, or perhaps, you know, toxins that hold you so tightly together that you feel that you're caged in through the toxins of pain or suffering or whatever it is. And that there are natural remedies that you can use that help to release this. Physical remedies, but also energetic remedies. And we know this, you know, if you're feeling stressed, all you have to do is walk somewhere where there is more oxygen or ions in the air, and your whole brain has the possibility to relax and be more focused and more productive. So nature is very useful on many levels.
I remember often visiting my grandmother, and she would have on every shelf, she would have these paper sheets with all these different herbs, and she would talk to them. And then later, she had on her table, and then use them and make tea and concussions and all kinds of things. And later she had the kitchen table, and there were some plants on it. And then she had to take pills for her heart. She was very old. And then she would take a pill, and then she would give the plant the same pill.
Wow.
And she would say, what's good for me is also good for the plant. And the love, the attention, I guess, didn't worry so much about the toxins of the pill. But it was very sweet.
I understand.
And I know you can talk to the plants too. I mean, it's called Icaros. You can sing the song of the Mother Earth, or you hear the song of her.
So I understand your grandmother, because I believe everything has a signature, which is in essence a movement of energy, which is sound in the end. And you can replicate every aspect of nature through creating a sound, such as, for example, in India, they have the sound of Om, which I believe to be the beginning of creation or the manifestation of creation. Every aspect of nature has that power, so you can utilize those signatures to connect to the essence of plants or the essence of a mountain or the stars, and you can bring that quality into healing. So if you are sick, for example, with, say, heart disease, like you were saying with your grandmother, you can connect to that signature that allows the heart to find the power of healing through the plants or through aspects of nature. And I think this is even used in homeopathy, where somehow the vibration of certain
That's right, that is
plants,
homeopathy.
exactly. And it's easy, it's not difficult.
But then, Tony, I mean, there are certain illnesses which start in the mind. So, and in my own experience, and I worked for many years as a healer, unless something shifted in the mind, you can heal the body in the moment, but it's coming out somewhere else, or it's coming back at the same place. So something is the herb or the plant able to shift the very thing in the mind?
Wow.
Or what do you do to help people wake up? Because I know your message is, you travel around in the world and your passion is to wake people up, up to who they are.
Exactly.
To know that everything is one.
Yes, that's a very important question, because it takes us beyond the mundaneness of, I'm sick and I want to get better.
Yes.
Why are you sick? What is causing the disharmony?
Yeah.
And most people don't want to know why, they just want to get better and carry on doing whatever they are doing that created perhaps the illness in the first place. So I would say that if someone is ready to go to that depth and change their life, transform their life, of course there are natural remedies out there that can help. And this, for example, the Native Americans have used herbs such as sage, which is considered very sacred. In India also there are herbs that people don't know really what they are. The soma, for example, that is written in the Vedas, that are sacred, that I believe help to transform consciousness, which is the core of my work really in the end. How to change the mind that's created that picture of disharmony that in the end has influenced the physical body to create disease. Because everything begins in the mind. That, every thought that you have creates some sort of disharmony, which has to go somewhere, and of course it goes to the physical body, or to the way you feel, or to the way you relate to yourself mentally. So I believe that meditation in essence is the way forward, and that is how to understand the mind and how to understand to let go of those perspectives that are creating disharmony. And actually it's quite a joyous thing, when you let go of things that make you unhappy, because they're not useful. And that is meditation. But there are plants that help meditation.
That is meditation.
Exactly, for me, that is meditation, to let go of everything that veils your joy and your spontaneous presence to this moment.
So you're not talking about sitting down in meditation?
Well, you can sit down in meditation if that's more comfortable. But
tell me more. That's interesting, because you also say something. To change a habit, we have to meditate for 120 days. That changes the whole physiology of the body. So tell me more about that.
Okay, so I mean, the thing with Western perspectives is that we want things to happen immediately. We want to sit and meditate for 20 minutes, and then if it doesn't work, we say, okay, meditation. I stop meditating, and it doesn't really work for me. But habits, as we know, take a long time to change. Anyone who's been addicted to cigarettes or alcohol or suffering exactly to their own mental picture knows that you have to be quite disciplined on some level and practice that clarity for a little while so that everything is let go of, so that you let go of not just the mental picture, but also the physical structure that holds on to that mental picture. For example, if we have fear, it's not just an idea. Fear lives in the body, lives in your emotions, lives in the nervous system.
Yeah.
And how do you let go of that without continuously reminding yourself of what is real? And meditation, some people are lucky. Some people will meditate for 20 minutes and have an enlightening experience and be free. But, that's not very common.
That's what they think. Some people just have an experience to be free, but then it's creeping all back again.
Exactly, especially if it still
and
lives.
And then what happens often, the ego takes hold of the experience.
And sees it as very important and then focuses on that rather than, expressing that beauty in the body, in the way you relate to nature, in the way you relate to people and yourself. And this is why I think any habit requires a long time to transform. And that is a joy. So actually when you're practicing meditation with that intention to let go of something, you're not counting the days. You're not thinking, okay, I've got 80 more days to go. You understand that you're getting closer and closer, so your heart feels more joy, more celebration, that you're getting closer to something that is so beautiful that it becomes timeless. Your journey becomes a whole movement of meditation. And then in the end, after 120 days, you don't realize that.
So how does that look practically, Tony?
Okay.
Let's take a habit, yeah?
Yes.
A visible habit, there are so many habits which are running through us which are not visible.
Exactly.
So let's take like an addiction to suffering or an addiction or whatever, fear.
Fear is a great one.
Yeah. Okay. So how do you resolve that on a practical level?
Okay. So the first step would be to understand that you have fear. To be conscious. Okay. I have whatever personality situations that create who I am, but I also have something that I don't really like inside of me, and that is fear.
Yeah.
Which usually it becomes unconscious or subconscious. It's hidden behind what is obvious. When we focus on that, it comes up to the surface. It shows itself. And one thing which is very common is that we say, oh, we don't want that. So we try to find other things, enlightenment or freedom or whatever idea that people have, that moves us away from the nasty feelings. The experience. So I would say, when you open up and say, okay, I want to embrace fear from that perspective of freedom, I don't want to run away from it, then you're becoming more conscious. That is the first step to meditation, consciousness. And when you are conscious that you have to work with fear, you're also conscious of the aspects of fear that need to be let go of. So for example, if you're afraid of expressing your love to someone, which obviously is very much part of fear, okay, I'm not going to fall into the old habit of playing a game or projecting or hiding behind a mask. I can show my love more clearly because I can see what fear is and I can see how it controls me. And I don't want to be controlled by that subconscious force anymore. I want to be real. I want to be myself. When you do that, nature, this is why nature is important for me, and also the universal aspect of nature, the stars, the galaxies, are naturally aligned to be more real. And when you are getting more into that space of realness, then nature supports your journey and you feel that you're not alone, and the movement from the unconscious, primitive mind of survival transcends itself and becomes much more, I don't know really what the word is, but much more enlightened. This is the word that people use.
People use. You don't use it.
I don't like it because it creates that sense of, enlightened, not enlightened, but, more free to explore itself in a real sense and show love. And then you can begin to be more like a spontaneous child, and show who you are to the person. And usually we realize that what we're afraid of are aspects of ourselves, not the love that we think will hurt us or whatever reasons we had to justify that fear.
Yeah.
And when we begin to see things as they really are, that love is actually a beautiful feeling, and the more we show to the world, the more we show to our partner or children, the more that reflects back not just from the family or from your partner, but also from the universe. There is a synchronicity that happens which supports your journey. Everything becomes more beautiful, more real. And this is what I found to be in South America. People are so real that in those dangerous, very difficult places, and the Amazon forest is not, paradise as people think. It's real. It has many aspects to it. There is a support that only happens to native people because they have let go of those fears. And I feel that in our Western culture today, we have to let go of those fears to transform that culture of aggression, the culture of war, the culture where we're constantly looking at what is important and best for us and ignoring, the common good and the beauty that can be shared with everyone in this world. This is why we're here.
Yeah. Well, it brings up a question in me of what freedom is. Because would you consider the people in South America free? I mean, they probably have other limitations.
Yes.
What is freedom for you? How do you experience freedom?
That's a good
freedom
question,
is not only being able to deal with snakes or sounds or whatever. Freedom is so much, much more.
It is. So I think, in the end, I don't try to put my perspective onto people's, belief systems or religious ideals.
Yeah.
I think freedom, in the end, is something that you know from your heart. Kabir and Rumi, the famous poets, speak about this. When your heart is able to just celebrate being alive and seeing the value in everything in that moment of aliveness. Now, different people will, measure that sense of freedom according to where they are at. For some people, freedom may mean, just to be free of disease, because that is physical disease. You have cancer, and that's what you want to be free of.
Yeah.
Maybe when you're free of the disease, you realize, wow, that was a journey. Maybe I want to be free of the suffering that my mind is creating. But not everyone understands that perspective until they go through certain experiences in life. And this is why we're here on Earth, to develop and to change our perspective. And I feel today, more than ever, more and more people are ready to transform the core, the essence, which is the Maya. I call the Maya, meaning the illusion that the mind creates. And I think freedom then is obvious. It's like Buddha experience. If you're attached to the negative perspectives of the mind, fear, worry, stress, then you're not free. And if you let all those aspects go, then there is a freedom that can't be spoken about, because as soon as you start speaking about that freedom, you're placing some perspective onto that freedom that limits the freedom, because it's a human perspective. And this is why, for example, in Sufism and in the mystical traditions of the Middle East, people don't like to put names to the divine. They reflect aspects of the divine as important, but they don't actually say the divine is this, and that is the ultimate. Because in the end, when you are in the space of freedom, then you don't need to, say, I'm here, look, this is where I'm at, because, then you are in the middle of something that is so beyond understanding, you can only express it in your attributes, like Mother Teresa or Gandhi, where your actions speak louder than your words. And for me, freedom goes beyond words. This is why I wrote the book, Beyond Words, because there is no word to explain true freedom.
In a way, true freedom is when, the self is not there anymore, not dominant,
exactly.
With its noise but here we go in the moment through a phase in the West of we are all hit by this enlightenment bug, and everybody is on this journey towards
somewhere
where they feel more happier and blissful, and just talking to you and reading your books made me actually realize to a much greater depth we have to take nature with us into the picture, yes. Which hardly any ever, I had so many interviews, but not many people talk about that aspect.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so that's one thing, the beauty, how you bring those two together, and
yes.
And your teaching in that. But then the question which arises is, isn't what we see a reflection of our mind?
Of course.
So then we are not focusing on saving the planet.
Of course. This is what I realized. This is what I realized. I had such an idea, I need to save the rainforest, but actually you're saving the rainforest or saving whatever the planet, saving whatever your passion is by being.
Yeah.
And that is the mystery of the alchemical process. It's not out there. You don't need anything specific that you have to do. I mean, you do need to do things. I'm not saying you just sit down and do nothing, but it must come from a different perspective of I need to go to that place and do this to save the rainforest. So I realized that my journey to many places, not just the rainforest, to the Zen Buddhist monastery and to the many parts of India and around the world where I met wise people, in the end was just an invitation to reflect back in this moment the reality that I was needing to understand. So, your question is how, to change that perspective. If you
mm-hmm.
want to save the rainforest, how can you do it from the perspective of freedom?
Yes.
I think, that is impossible to answer, because when you are free,
yeah.
everything that you do then channels that universal, beautiful love that is nature, and you become so powerful, not from an ego sense, but you become so powerful in your actions that you influence much more than is possible from the perspective where you want to conflict with certain situations so that you can change what is happening around you. So this is why Mother Teresa, for example, all she did was some very simple, beautiful actions with people. She didn't sit back and do nothing. Her karma yoga, so to speak, or her selfless service was real.
Yeah.
But it came from a perspective that is so much more powerful. It's a free perspective, and I believe that...
She was basically, you become a tool.
Exactly,
of the universe,
exactly.
of true nature or the absolute.
Exactly.
To heal
channel
itself.
Yeah, and to channel that beauty and love, which then allows for miracles to happen. And I think we need a miracle in this world today, that where we're facing so many interesting challenges.
Yeah.
And the miracle doesn't have to come from one person or one perspective. I think it's a group consciousness where, as humanity, we realize that together, from that perspective where we're able to channel love, where we're able to channel what is in essence so beautiful and so good, everything changes. We create a quantum leap into a perspective that we can't even see from where we're at in this moment.
Sure.
And this happens, to everyone. You can imagine, when you're a teenager and you see the world in one way, and everything is so intense and powerful, and you see things in that teenage way, which is beautiful. And then look at how life changes, as you have experiences and you adapt and change to whatever life is teaching you. See, everything changes, everything is impermanent. And in the end, we have that experience, but people want to hold on to one perspective. And if we are just free enough to let go of the old and invite the new. And the new is, you know, that perspective of
Yeah.
freedom. Then
But as you mentioned earlier, how difficult it is
it is.
to change a habit.
It is.
And in particular, this whole survival, I mean, so many people out there in the moment, because of the situation, running on their survival, fear of survival.
Yes.
How can you tell them to let go? How can you tell them whatever you tell? How do you do that? What do you teach, Tony?
Yeah.
How do you wake people up?
I tell them, come and experience meditation, you know, because the first step is consciousness. Come and sit in a space where the chaotic mind and the chaotic situation that you're seeing on TV or reading on the news just takes a back seat somewhere, or just you let it go for a little while, and observe what it's like to sink into a different reality. You know, you cannot explain, you cannot force people to see this. You can only allow that experience to happen. So this is why, for me, meditation is so essential. It's so simple. You know, it is simply a technique of focus, where you focus on something that allows the mind not to drift off here and there and everywhere into all the worries, stresses, addictions that, you know, the mind likes to go to control it and to stop it. And just see that there is something beyond that struggle that can allow for freedom. Now, I can't put that in words. That's why it's an experience. This is why I say you need to sit and meditate for 120 days. You know, it's not enough for 20 minutes one day to experiment to see if it works or not. Because the deeper you go, it's like a dream. You know, the deeper you go into the dream, the more sense it makes. And when you sit and meditate, you find quietness, you find stillness inside of yourself. And behind that stillness, in that stillness, there are some perspectives that you can explore. And, you know, for some people, they're lucky. You know, it happens immediately. They just say, wow, I understand. For other people, it takes a little while. You know, like cigarette smoking. You know, for some people, they can stop smoking cigarettes in 2 days. Others, there is a bit more of a struggle. Doesn't mean that ones who take a bit longer, you know, are more backward or, you know, somehow less developed or less conscious. Just means they have more to learn, and it's more exciting. So the journey, if continue it for 120 days, becomes more interesting, because you begin to see much more than just, I need to stop smoking. And this meditation is something that people have practiced throughout the ages. And there is no time in the world today, because, you know, I see, even coming here to the studios, you know, people traveling the underground and on the train, you know, they're so fast. There is no time to sit.
Even you are running around the planet,
I was.
trying to wake people up.
Wake up, yeah.
Are you calming down?
I am. That's
so
what
you
happens.
do more meditation now.
Well, actually, traveling, I still do travel. I traveled here to London. But, you know, I think people, the internet and TV, you know, and media is such a wonderful tool. And for me, that becomes an easier way to reach more people. And I think that people listen and hear and feel the importance of such in technology today. You know, on YouTube there are so many wonderful videos, on conscious TV. You know, it's much more normal. You know, it's a much more real thing for
and
people.
don't you think there is also an energy which is supporting that in the moment?
Exactly. And on many levels, you know, I hear that, you know, peace, for example, you know, in the old days it was all about traveling and speaking and dialoguing with one another, but now the media can play a role that is amazing, you know, if conscious, you know, not all media is, you know, aware to do that, and can help change situations before they develop into conflict. And, you know, that is my deeper intention today. It's, you know, how to bring more harmony to the world, to the maximum amount of people, without, you know, having to do so many things as I used to do in the past, like you say, travel every week to one place and then to another place. And I believe that, you know, there is an energy that is supporting that transformation. People are looking today and searching more actively for something that they know, but quite don't quite understand. And I think the media is the way forward.
Yeah.
So I focus much more on the internet. I still work with people, of course,
Yeah.
but also traveling, it's difficult because, I don't want to just support people for a few moments, one day workshop or a satsang, somewhere. I want to support people in a way that is more continuous.
Yeah.
And it's impossible for me to be in all those places at the same time on this physical level. So, it's important then to utilize technology. So this is what I'm doing, and I think many people are doing this, consciously, and it's a wonderful thing. Like the work that you're doing, you're bringing a different perspective to the world, and to people watching from wherever, and how to practice that in their daily lives.
Yeah.
And that is important for me. People don't have to go to India or South America to find something, it's
Just switch the computer on.
and open your heart.
Well, a heart. You have mentioned in your book the longest journey we have to make is from our head to our heart.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
What helped you to drop into your heart?
I think, and this sounds funny, I think suffering.
I agree, suffering is just here to help open our heart.
Yeah.
I always had this belief.
And, I say that just because, some people may be watching say, oh, it's easy for you, Tony, or it's easy for all those people who have the time to meditate or have the time and knowledge to practice certain techniques to get to a more free space. But actually, suffering, when embraced, from a conscious perspective, and we're all conscious, we just don't know. When engaged and worked with from that perspective, I feel invites you to be more human. And this is what I like about people like Mother Teresa or the Dalai Lama, that they're so human, it shows, and you don't have to call them enlightened because just what they are, shows that they're free, and I think without suffering, it's difficult to see how to be human, and this is perhaps why we're here, to embrace things from such a beautiful perspective, no matter what the situation is. It makes us unique, conscious human beings are amazingly powerful, and I think, everyone can be conscious simply by embracing everything that they are, not hiding, not running away or trying to live up to some sort of perspective that is alien to who you are, but just being yourself, and that is coming back to the heart, like children, they are themselves.
And I remember a story I was reading in one of Dalai Lama's books many years ago. In order for him to open his heart and find compassion, he went to Hiroshima to be with the suffering.
Wow.
And that helped open his heart and brought him to compassion.
Wow.
Yeah.
I agree.
Was it your own suffering which helped you?
Well, it wasn't quite my own suffering. I grew up in Egypt and in places where suffering through poverty was much more obvious.
Yeah.
And I asked myself, why do people have to suffer in this way? Why? I began to question everything, really. What is the meaning of life? Why is there this pain and suffering? For me, life was quite easy, because I had everything.
Yeah.
But I wasn't happy with just the selfish satisfaction of needs. I wanted to understand how to make a difference to those people that were right next to me, and I think that opened my perspective in a way that just remained forever as a core part of me, not just to focus on me, but how to make a difference in the world.
Yeah.
And I didn't know, I was a child, but it's part of my personality, to understand how to alleviate suffering. And I think, like the Dalai Lama, when you see it and you're open to it and you understand it, then you understand that it's not enough to buy a new car or to do whatever to feel happy. There is much more to life.
You mentioned we need a miracle before. which is true. And you say the heart is what makes a human being a hero. And I think we need heroes.
Definitely, and I totally agree with that. We are all heroes in the end.
We just don't know it.
We just don't know it, and we have to embrace that action, you know, and it's such an amazing gift to be alive today in this world, no matter what it is going through. And, you know, just by being alive, present to all that is going on, that's a heroic journey in itself.
You're right. Yeah. Yes. Because there are lots of scary things going on.
For sure, for young people, for everyone.
Yeah, and also in yourself, scary feelings and fear, and just to embrace everything as nature.
Exactly.
Is a heroic act.
And it's possible.
It's possible. Do you know somebody
who
could do it?
It's possible. Everyone can do it.
Yeah.
This is the thing.
If you put your mind to it, yeah.
And that is through meditation, through focus, so that you don't get caught by the games that the mind plays.
So, another thing I want to ask you, which I found really interesting, is you say breathing correctly is saying yes to life and therefore becoming free in our body. And I'm very interested in that because I'm reading a lot about the nervous system in the moment and how to bring peace into the body.
Exactly.
You know, I can experience stillness up here and drop into these voids and, you know, into silence. But, you know, in my daily life, I experience my body is just reacting to certain things.
Yes.
How do I find peace not only up here, but also up here? And it's not enough understanding it here.
Yeah.
I need to go through an experience.
Yeah, the body is a mirror. You know, I see when you go to the supermarket and there is that Friday stress where everyone is rushing around. Even if you're at peace, you know, you pick up things. And this is why native people and people who live in more natural, beautiful surrounds say that, you know, it's madness to be in the world today. And the body is definitely influenced by such. And just the technology and the stress of, you know, radiation and noise and pollution and whatever, you know, creates a reaction in the body, which I believe moves us away from that inner stillness or inner balance. And that is why I focus on the body as being the temple, you know, the structure that maintains the possibility for stillness in the mind and in the emotions, how to transform that. And that is through the breath. You know, we know.
Yeah, because you also say that you can see in the way we breathe our limitations and emotions.
Exactly. Because, you know, the breath is the closest reflection to the state of the physical body. You know, if you're stressed, you breathe quickly. If you're relaxed or dreaming or in a state of consciousness where you're happy, you know, your breath reflects that. So if you're conscious and if you're able to work with the breath, to relax the breath to a state of harmony, then the body takes that as the real reference rather than the pollution or the noise or the stresses outside. And that becomes like a mantra, you know, that you focus on all the time whenever you feel there is disharmony in the body. So, you know, one thing that I teach, and I hope people can teach this at school and, you know, in hospitals and in places where, you know, people are dealing with much more physical stress than is normal. You know, just breathe in, take a deep breath in, the diaphragm, you know, relax the diaphragm and breathe out and take a moment just to sense what it's like to let go of the physical stress. Notice how your shoulders relax.
So you breathe in.
Deep breath, deep breath.
Deep breath.
Relaxing the diaphragm. And then breathe out. And when you breathe out, notice how your whole body just relaxes. And that state of relaxation is essential for the quality of health that the body needs to be free. You know, you can't say, oh yes, I'm free, and then you have your body, you know, all tight and stressed because of whatever is around. You know, you have to be able to reflect that in a more conscious way. And I believe the breath to be essential. This is why in yoga there is pranayama, which is the science of breath. But there is no need to go so deeply into breathing. It's a simple matter of letting go of stresses. When you do that, I think your body relaxes and comes back to a state which is much more joyous. You know, it's much more easy to feel happiness when you're relaxed than when you're stressed. And I think this is something that anyone can do.
I know, but
wherever.
I forget. I forget
Of
the
course.
breathing because it's something so like I forget that my heart is pumping. It's something so normal.
Exactly.
Yeah, and you know, of course, it's another habit, the way we breathe, and to change this habit, do we have to go through a period of...
No. To change that habit, the problem is that in the West we're so much in the mind. That is where the energy is. We have to bring it back down to the body. So the breathing is a reminder for the body to be part of what's going on. You know,
to be alive.
To be alive, you know, and this is why native people, you know, when they see Western people walking, they say, my gosh, you know, where are they? Which planet are they on? Because they're not here on Earth. Because, you know, the way they're walking is not grounded. And, you know, when you breathe in that deep, relaxed way, you know, you realize, I have a body. I can interact with my body in a way that is not just reflecting the stress. I can show the world that I'm happy. You know, like your partner, you know, if your body is relaxed, you can embrace them with that joy and relaxed body. And they feel it, and you feel the connection to the physical realm, because we are manifested here on this physical realm. We have to ground ourselves here. And I feel the breath is the first step to remember the body. And I think when you remember the body several times, oh yeah, I've got my hands, oh yeah, I've got my feet, and I'm walking on the ground, you know, it becomes more an automatic response to how you experience the world. You slowly ground yourself in a way that is not normal in the West. This is why in Zen Buddhism, part of the meditations are called walking meditations, where you listen to a rhythm. That can be the rhythm of the mantra that you're chanting, or an external rhythm, and you walk in a way where consciousness is manifested through your action. You know, your physical action, the way you touch the earth, the way you show your body to the world. And I think this is very important. This is, you know, a matter of practice, and the more practice, the easier it gets.
So, Tony, do you have your own practice you do on a daily basis, or?
Of course. I think everyone has their own practice. So I never say, you know, this is the way. You know, you have to do this, and you have to do it like this. Everyone is unique. Every human being has a personality, has a perspective, has such a wonderful way of learning. You shouldn't push it aside and then say, no, this is not right, and this is the right way to do things. But for me, meditation, which is in a much wider perspective, just relating to the harmony of life rather than the distractions of the mind, can be put into practice, into real practice. So perhaps saying to yourself, every 3 hours I'll take 2 minutes just to breathe and to look at the world from a different perspective. You know, you have to remind, as you said in the beginning, you know, if you forget, you have to have reminders. And the reminder can be you just saying to yourself, I need discipline, so this means I need to remind myself in the morning and the evening to sit in meditation. But then that sitting becomes the meditation that carries on in, you know, your daily experience, and even in your sleep. You know, if you meditate for 20 minutes before falling asleep, you know, the mantra that you repeat, or the focus on some beautiful aspect, such as poetry or a beautiful quality of the heart, is carried deeper into your sleep. And also in the morning, if you wake up and you meditate, then you start the day with a different perspective, which, you know, goes beyond just the 20 minutes of meditation that you have as your practice. So, you know, this is what I like to do. I like to bring spirituality into life. the way you relate to people, the way you say hello to someone that you don't know, you know, your acts of kindness to everyone, just your relationship to everything becomes a spiritual work. So if you're Christian, if you're Muslim, if you're Buddhist, you can continue your practice. But you know, the quality, the heart, needs to be very much the most important aspect of that practice. And for me, you know, I find it very useful to repeat beautiful mantras, sacred sounds. You know, if you're a Hindu, you can practice, for example, the sound of Om. I usually say to people, why not try Hu, which is H-U.
It's a Sufi sound.
It's a Sufi sound, a Middle Eastern sound, but it can be anything. It could be light, which in Aramaic is nur, you know,
Nur?
Nur, you know, and you can say, you know, light, 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 so that every situation that the mind thinks of that is worrying or limiting or dark or negative, you know, has another force that you can reference to, which is light, or Om, which is the creation of life. Or if you're Christian, you can, you know, chant something from the Christian tradition. If you're Muslim, you can chant something from the Muslim tradition. It's up to each person. In the end, it is like Kabir says, you know, there are many ways, but you know, there is only one real way, and that is the way of the heart. And I think if you are truly real, and you're, you know, coming back to your heart, then it doesn't matter what the practice is. You know, it's your action that counts.
Yeah. It's beautiful. I'm just looking at the clock. I think we have to finish.
Yes.
I wanted to talk with you about children, and we might do another interview on that if you
I'm
are
happy.
Okay
Yeah,
with
I'm happy
that,
to do that.
because it's such a big subject and
It is.
A worrying one.
It is, yeah. It is.
But also delightful.
Yes.
And well, it was lovely to talk to you, Tony, and
Thank you.
to have you back in your busy schedule, and I show you books again.
Thank you.
So, Deeper Than Words, and in those books you find Tony's teaching from now, the way you teach now, and From the Heart. And if you would like to know more about his journey to become a shaman, this is a fascinating one, Shaman's Wisdom. Okay, well, thank you for watching Conscious TV, and thank you, Tony, for being with us, and I will see you again soon. Goodbye.
Hello, my name is Tony Samara, and I'd like to show you a very practical breathing meditation that I find very essential in today's busy, busy world. Take a moment to just sit down, relax your body, relax your shoulders, make sure that you're completely free of whatever worries or thinkings that occupy the mind, and come back to the breath. Take a deep breath. Experiment with breathing in deeply into your belly, relaxing the diaphragm. More breath, more breath. And then relax. And as you let go of the breath, feel how the mind and all the energy of your body moves to a deeper state of consciousness. As you breathe out, let go of everything. Feel how the face and the neck and the shoulders and the body just sink into a more beautiful, more tranquil space. Now that your body is relaxed, you can breathe even more. Take another deep breath. A happy, joyous breath where everything feels much more beautiful, much more harmonious, much more clear. And as you breathe out, notice how your mind and the energy of your body with your out-breath goes deeper and deeper to a space where you gently discover a sense of tranquility, a sense of stillness, a sense of peace, and embrace that from a perspective of joy, a perspective of yes, this is now part of who I am. This sense of relaxation, this sense of beauty, this sense of harmony is now manifested in my body, and continue to breathe in and out in this beautiful way as long as you feel comfortable. And perhaps carrying on that intention throughout the day, and every time you find yourself lost in the stresses and the actions of the mundaneness, coming back to that tranquility. Slowly, when you're ready, coming back. Thank you. Well, my childhood was quite different for me. Looking at things, I was very sensitive, very aware of many things. So, whatever happened around me influenced the way I felt. So if there was disharmony or any pain or suffering, I would easily pick that up. So this is the reason why the herbal remedies that my grandmother gave me was great, because whatever, I would feel it in my body. So she would prepare natural medicines that actually cured these symptoms, and that sparked an interest in nature and all its beautiful aspects, including herbal remedies. And I realized that there are many ways of doing things. You don't just have to go to medicine and get a tablet. There is a deeper aspect to whatever is going on in the physical body. I started to look at emotions and why there is disharmony. So basically, my childhood was a beautiful childhood because, I loved life and I was a happy child, but I began to focus more internally than most children do at that age. So it started my spiritual journey in the sense that I became more conscious of many things that are not necessary for such a young child as I was at the age of 3, 4. And my grandmother was a beautiful influence because she understood me, and she understood my sensitivity and worked with that as grandmothers who love their grandchildren do. So that was, what supported my inner growth at that time was the love and the support and the understanding. So it was a positive experience, and that was my experience from the beginning, that spirituality is not something complicated, but rather something connected to coming back home to an aspect that you feel comfortable and enjoy being in. And that was the care of my grandparents, especially my grandmother, who had time to do this. My parents were very busy.
And were you aware when you had contact with other children that they were maybe different from you?
In the beginning, no. Because, every child believes that they don't look at that aspect of life. They just believe that they're part of whatever is going on without separating, I'm this or I'm that. But in the end, it became clear that the way I saw the world and the way I interacted with the world was very different by just observing other children around me. They were very interested, for example, in what I call the visions that I had and the perceptions that I had around various topics. And I used to be able to tell stories about these visions and entertain, my little friends by telling them things that, made sense to them, because children know, when something is real, or they feel when something is real. But
they were not able to see that without that guidance. So it was like I always took that role of looking more deeply into something and then encouraging my brothers, friends, to look into that level of reality, rather than just, perhaps what most children do, which is, entertainment, watching TV or playing in the playground. There was a more internalized depth.
And what kind of visions did you have?
Well, I lived in many countries as a child, and one of the places that I spent most time in is Egypt. And Egypt is my family worked there. Egypt is a very powerful and sacred place. So my first memories of strong visions, I'm sure I had more, were of the people who used to live there, the priests and the priestesses and the mystery schools. And I didn't really know what I was seeing. I was just speaking to my parents about what I saw in this different dimension. And a lot of what I said, wasn't just a story. It had some relevance to history and to...
So you were going back in the past,
exactly,
and seeing things.
Exactly.
And you were obviously in the present, and you're seeing visions of how things were in that place or in that country in the past.
Exactly, because we live very close to the pyramids. And
right.
It's a very powerful place, and it does create this state of perception in some sensitive people where you go easily into the past, and perhaps also easily into the future, and more deeply into the present.
And did that scare you at all as a child, or
No,
did it seem natural?
It seemed totally natural.
Yeah.
I thought everyone did the same. I didn't realise that I was different. But it's complicated, because if you don't fit into the norms, like at school and in certain situations, then you do feel a little bit alien, and that started to be more obvious to me later on. That even though these perceptions were wonderful, they separated me from the general feeling of growing up. I felt much more a loner than some children. Even though I had lots of friends around me, I didn't relate to so many things so easily, except for, as you mentioned, my grandmother and some very interesting people who I met along the way.
Because you were quite sick, weren't you? You had problems with your immune system, I think,
Exactly.
with your blood.
Yes. I suffered. I have a genetic thing called thalassemia, which is a type of blood disorder. It's not a major one, but it does. If your emotions and your physical state are not so strong, it does create this sense of vulnerability to sickness. And so I went through an interesting experience as a child. I was very active and very interested in life, yet I had to struggle with the health aspect of it. The energy that I wanted to expend doing things wasn't always there. So I lay in bed meditating. Now I can see I was meditating.
Right.
Having these visions and looking into different aspects of my life and people around me, because I had the time, and I had the perceptions and the sensitivity to do that.
And as you got older, you got quite into reading, didn't you?
Very much.
Spiritual books.
Very much. Actually, not that old. At 10, 11, I found some books about yoga, and I found that fascinating, because I could relate to a lot of what was being written in regards to spirituality, because my family were not spiritual at all. They were just, interested in life. And so I didn't have that reference point to, communicate to. So the books became a major help to make me realize that it's not so strange, that actually many people go through these experiences, and to support that experience to go more deeply and to grow. And I think this is important when you're a child. When you're an adult, you can look for it consciously, but as a child, it's very difficult to go to a meditation center or a yoga course. You're more dependent on your family life, and my family life was very, very normal.
And then I think you moved to England, and then you got quite involved with left-wing politics.
Yeah. Yes. I wouldn't say, I was fanatic in that sense. My goal was that I saw suffering around me, you know, that the world is not a nice place for everyone. And I grew up in a very wealthy family and everything was perfect, you know, and I had everything that I needed. And I didn't question anything, but, you know, after seeing that the world is not like my world, you know, that people actually suffer a lot, I didn't find it so fair. So I wanted to change that. And I felt that politics perhaps was a good way to do this, you know, because if the political system changes, then perhaps the world can be changed on many levels. And so I became quite involved with, you know, organizations rather than political parties that were there to create a more fair society.
Yeah, I can really relate to that because I was very much the same. I saw things weren't right, and I thought the answer was you had to change the structure of politics, and then things would be fairer, people would be happier. And I got very involved with time, and then probably like you did much faster than me, I realised that actually that in itself wasn't the answer. But
well, I realised a lot of the people that were within those organisations weren't happy. So, you know, that was my sort of big sort of opening to, okay, maybe there's a different way, because if they're not happy and they didn't have that sort of structure within themselves, how can they change the world in a real sense? You know, it was just more idealism than reality. So then I wanted to change the world more deeply than just, you know, everyone gets a certain amount of money and a car and a house. I wanted the whole structure of the world to change so that happiness and joy comes from living rather than just having certain items. Because I realized in my life that, you know, wealth is interesting and it makes life comfortable, but it's not, it doesn't bring the deep joys that a human being needs, you know, to be happily alive. You know, it's a helpful thing, but it's not the answer.
Absolutely. and then with you were always moving, as you said, because your parents were diplomats, and you moved to Oslo.
Yes.
And there you got involved with a local Buddhist group.
Yes. So that was much later on in life. I was 14, 15.
Still quite young, though.
Yeah. And at that age, you know, as a teenager, I feel that most teenagers need to fit in. And I realized I really did not fit in. You know, I was so different that I struggled against that part of myself. And I was, I would say, ashamed that my perception and sensitivity pushed me to a point where I was so different. So I was really trying to fit in. And there was a struggle. At the age of 13, 14, there was a big struggle within myself. And I realized at one point that I can't change. You know, I just have to accept myself. And that's when I started being very interested in meditation, Buddhism, Zen Buddhism. And when you are interested in something, you know, somehow life guides you to those places where you can explore them more deeply. So I got involved with a Buddhist group, first a Tibetan Buddhist group and then a Zen Buddhist group.
So did meditation come easy for you?
Totally. It was a totally natural thing. And I realized that it wasn't something that I had to learn, that I actually practiced as a child. You know, I remembered many moments when, at the age of 3 or 4 or 5, where I was doing meditation, but just, you know, not consciously, breathing in a certain way, closing my eyes, focusing in a certain way, you know, where the world, the mundane world, was not everything, you know, where you could go more deeply. And that's, for me, meditation, you know, where you can go to a space that brings wisdom and clarity to consciousness so that you understand the big picture. And that's it. When you're a teenager, you need more structure, and that structure I found in Zen Buddhism, you know, a very disciplined, very clear way of how to do things.
Certainly it's a very unusual thing, especially these days, for a teenager to find structure in Zen Buddhism.
Yes, and my family got very worried because I decided to go deeper and realize that, you know, this was so important that it's not enough to just practice, you know, an hour of meditation per day or do a weekend course. I wanted to devote my whole life to meditation, so I went to the Zen Buddhist monastery and studied with a Zen master, Japanese Zen master called Roshi Sasaki, and that was an amazing experience.
This was in California.
It was in California.
Moved to California, yeah.
And that was an amazing experience because it was so different from anything that I ever expected. I had no reference point to, even imagine what life would be like in a Zen Buddhist monastery, except my determination to be free and to find joy and happiness inside.
So let's look at that. So you're kind of late teens and you're still, you're still very young, but you've got this thought that you just said, determination to be free. What did that mean to you then, determination to be free?
This means that your whole focus is really clear. And for me, my whole life experience showed me that, the one real important thing is to be free of whatever is creating suffering, distraction, feelings of just not being connected to something greater. And I didn't, I read in books, okay, there is this beautiful sense of enlightenment, there is this beautiful other world that we can work towards, but I didn't have that experience within me. And my determination was to come to that experience from within.
So you understood there was a potential there.
Exactly.
And you were attracted towards that potential. You saw the monastery as the way to realise that potential.
Yeah, because I had no doubt in my mind, in my heart, that the Zen master was totally free. And I felt that to get to that point, it's not enough to do this by yourself. You need someone who understands the points where you can get caught up in, distracted, wander off. You need someone that can help you to go directly to that space. And, I felt a deep gratitude to be alive at that time when there was someone enlightened who could guide me in this way. So, there was...
So you got to the monastery, and
yes.
I think there was 30 people living there,
yes,
including Leonard Cohen, apparently.
Apparently, yes.
Yeah, so he was there. But
I didn't know, because I wasn't into that, famous public figures. But yeah, later on,
was,
I didn't know who he was.
He wasn't playing his guitar.
No, you don't do that in Zen monasteries.
Yeah. So what was the structure like in the monastery?
Very disciplined, very Japanese, where you get up early in the morning, 3:30, and basically the whole day is about meditation. So there is sitting meditation, walking meditation, and there are a few hours where you do the cleaning of the monastery, the garden, the kitchen. And I would say we sat in meditation most days for at least 10 hours, 11 hours, which is what worried my parents, who had no idea what Zen Buddhism meant. They thought it was a cult. And to sit down in meditation for so long to them seemed like some sort of brainwashing was going on, because they didn't understand why a teenager at 17, 18 would be doing this. But for me, it was the space, the structure where I could go to those places where, it's very difficult to understand without having that monastery setting. In life, it's very difficult, I feel, to get to those places because there is so much else around that requires your interaction and your attention. The monastery is very simple. Zen Buddhism is a very simple way of doing things. Everything is done with with a sense of I don't know what the English word is, but beauty. There is a sense of simplicity and beauty in everything that you do. The way you eat, the way you prepare food, the way you speak.
Very precise.
Very precise.
Yeah.
And I like that, because it really helped you to focus on what was going on in that moment, rather than thinking, okay, this or that, and the whole structure supported that, and everyone else doing this meant that you had this amazing atmosphere that was so powerful for you to be in that space. And for a teenager, it was something I'd never experienced, so it was even more powerful because everything seemed so profound. The people were amazing people. The Zen Buddhist master was an amazing person. The beauty of the whole monastery was just... I enjoyed it so much. You know, it wasn't like people say, "Gosh, that was hard work."
Yeah.
You know, for me, it was a great thing. I always see it as one of the most amazing gifts that I experienced.
Well, apparently, actually, you were doing extra. In Nomi's book, she was saying that you would stay up late at night and do extra meditation.
Yeah, I'm a stubborn sort of person.
But you're very determined as well.
Yeah. So, yeah, normally lights were out at 8:30, 9, and I would stay up till 11, sometimes 12, doing, you know, what is called extra meditation, and you're allowed to do that next to the Zen master's room. And I felt the energy of the place meant, you know, this was just necessary to do, being next door to the Zen master. And I just meditated for as long... I used every moment, every possible moment to come back to the space of what it means to be free.
And you also made a big decision there to be celibate for life as well.
I did.
Which at 18 years old is a huge decision to make.
Yeah.
What was behind that?
Well, I didn't want to be distracted by anything of the world, and I'm very easy. I fall in love very easily with someone, very romantic, very, you know, it's not that I don't like relationships, it's the opposite. So I felt that, you know, for me to go deeper, I really needed to have the space and the structure where, you know, there wasn't anything else that influenced what was going on in me. I wanted to dedicate my whole life at that point to just being in the monastery.
So you were very total, weren't you?
Total.
Yeah.
Looking back, I can see how total.
No, it's a quality I admire in people, this being so total about something.
I didn't want anything to come in the way, including, you know, what people thought, my family, what they thought, money, qualifications, you know, because my family wanted me to study at university.
Yeah.
I just wanted to focus on what I felt was most important, and I did. You know, I'm determined. So I left home, and that's what I did for a few years.
And then, but after 18 months, you actually decided to leave the monastery.
I did.
And you went to India.
And that was a difficult decision, because I enjoyed being there, but I felt it got too easy. And I like to set challenges up.
Yeah.
You know, in my life, I don't like things being too easy. So what was easy was not that, you know, I mean, you learn forever. It never gets easier, it actually gets more complicated. But what was easy was just the structure was very easy for me.
Because it supported you.
It supported me,
Yeah.
and I wanted to see how I could create that feeling outside in the world, you know, in places like India. I went to India, in places like London. You know, how can I carry that peace that I felt and experienced in the monastery into daily activity, and in places where things are not so harmonious? And that was quite a tough decision, because it's not that easy. I realized later, you know, when going into the world, that, you know, it's not that easy. And the Zen Buddhist master was letting me know that in a very subtle way, you know, that perhaps it's good to stay a bit longer. But he understood why I needed to go, so supported me totally in that.
So you went to India, and I think
that was
right at the beginning you had your money stolen.
No, I didn't have my money.
Okay.
Actually, what happened? I gave it away.
It says in Nomi's book that you gave half of it away to someone to buy a rickshaw.
You're right. You're
and then
right.
the next day, someone
Thank you.
stole everything.
Yeah, that's right. The first part was I gave money away because
you kept half of it, and then that was stolen.
Yes, that was an interesting experience in India, because not to have money is quite a thing. I didn't. You know, I don't like suffering. I don't like other people to suffer, and where I went to in India, there was a lot of suffering. You know, it was very. It's very dramatic. You know, the poor and the rich, and the differences between people in the physical sense. It's much more than I'd ever experienced before. Even though I grew up in Egypt, where there is a big difference, it's not to that extent. So I gave money away just because I felt, I didn't need it, and I kept half, like you say. But obviously the universe wanted me to learn how to be, more spontaneous and not to depend on, going to a hotel and having a nice bed to sleep in. So it helped me to travel around India in a much more beautiful way. And actually I was supported and invited by people to be in places where if I had had the money, I don't think I would have gone to those places. So, it was an interesting experience.
So you were a pilgrim in a way,
Yeah,
weren't you?
yeah, which was my intention, not to go as a tourist and just, take photos, but to go back to the places where Buddha experienced various aspects of his life, and just to see the sacred areas of India. And I loved it. And I loved not having the money, because in a way that created a different challenge, where you had to depend on more than just one thing in your life. You had to depend on yourself and how you approach people and the quality of communication with people, And in India, that is really, if you're direct and open, it's an amazing place. You see another world, which is very difficult to see from a hotel room or from, from that space.
Did you feel the peace growing in you during this time? Was it, obviously a lot happened in the monastery. Did you feel that process deepening?
Definitely. And I continued the meditation. It's not that, leaving the monastery meant that I stopped doing what was important. It's just I continued in a different way in the world, and I felt the peace was growing, and I felt the structure of what I learnt helped me very much in the mundane world. So it's not like I went back into the mundane and got distracted. My focus was totally there, but to put it into practice with people. And I actually started teaching quite early, meditation. So, that structure helped me, to work with other people, helped me to understand.
So you taught meditation in India?
Not so much in India,
No.
after in Australia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've got a lot to get in, so I'm going to move you on a bit. So
Okay.
you went to Australia, and I think you were studying marine biology at university there.
I did, yes.
And then you had the, not so much the thought, but you had the real strong feeling that you wanted to go to South America,
Yes.
to the Amazon area,
Yes.
where you wanted to help save the rainforest.
Yes. Yes.
So what was going on in you then?
Well, I studied marine biology as a way to be in the world, because I was not making money, so you have to create some sort of income in the world.
Yes.
In the monastery,
Yes.
you're supported totally, but in the world you have to do something. So I felt, what can I do that actually is useful? And nature, because I love nature, seemed like a good way to create an income. And then I thought to teach meditation as a hobby, as a part-time thing. And studying at university was a great thing, but I realized that my idea and the reality of the world, it's not, university is so academic in a certain way, and it doesn't really address a lot of the practical problems. So even though I studied applied science, I wanted to do more. And at one point I got invited by a group of people in Brazil to go and visit a setup there, a national park that was being set up in a very specific way. And that to me seemed much more exciting than sitting in a classroom and writing down statistics about this and that, and it seemed much more real. So I wanted to motivate myself more by going and doing something in a much more practical way. Conservation. That was my sort of
Yes.
feeling. And also, I would say, on a deeper level, I was a little bit disappointed with the world, to see that people just wasted so, when you live in a monastery, life is so precious, and every moment is so full of many things, and then in the world, you can see the opposite happening, people just wasting time. I felt wasting time by doing things that comes more out of ignorance, just, focusing on ego-related aspects of themselves. And so, there was a bit of a disappointment not in people, but just in that perhaps this world is impossible to change. So let me find something smaller that I can change rather than the whole big world.
Yes.
Let me focus on something that is more possible to change, which I felt, could be, saving the Amazon rainforest, saving the ecosystem.
And then you got out to South America, and Naomi talks quite. It's very, very fascinating. She talks about how you got in a canoe to go to a village, and then one of the guys in the canoe was attacked by some killer bees and stung, and everybody else in the canoe was laughing at him. And you thought actually this was quite cruel of them. But then
I thought it was a bit schizophrenic.
But then you had a realization a few days later, didn't you? About
it's very funny when you live in such an intense place like the rainforest. The rainforest is so overwhelmingly strong, the elements within the rainforest, the air and the space. You don't really think very clearly. So I sat in the canoe and thought, okay, let me just go and see, where am I going to end up? At that point I had a little bit of doubt. I thought, this is a very strange place. I need to perhaps go back, and do something more, not in the community of shamans, but more, outside on the periphery. But I just went deeper into the rainforest and went to the village, and realized that actually the reference point was that the native people relate to the world in a totally different way, just like children do. Their whole perception of the world is so different. And I understood that that difference meant that they trusted much more what was going on than civilized, so-called civilized human beings. The mind that is civilized tends to create this distinction, which I call separation between what is really going on and what goes on in the mind. And so we're always, jumping ahead of the situation by thinking into the situation that something will happen. And the native people are much more like children. They just seem to go on into a space that's much more expansive. So it's not that they don't think, but they think with a different energy. It's not so much from the ego, it's much more in the moment. And
it's more inclusive of something wider, isn't it?
Exactly. And the laughter is not, like people laugh at you because you're doing something silly, but the laughter was more that, they trusted so much what they call Mother Earth, Pachamama, that, they believed that whatever was going on as an experience was supportive, rather than, like in the Western culture, we believe that nature somehow is a threat to our well-being because we're individuals and we're separate. So we have to navigate within the dangers of nature or our own mind in a specific way. The native people embrace much more. So they were embracing the experience by being joyous, which I feel is an important aspect of spirituality today, is what I teach. Spirituality is not a serious thing. It's about embracing reality from a sense of that openness and that joyousness and that love that I somehow perceived in that moment, not from the intellect, but just from what was going on, because it was such a powerful experience.
I think soon after that you had the realization that you hadn't come to help save the rainforest, you'd come to help save yourself.
Of course, that's what you realize. You always think that you're, doing something for other people, but it's a bit like a relationship. In the end, the deeper you go, the more you realize that there is so much more to it than what you first thought. So I realized that I wasn't there to do any of saving the world or saving any aspect of the external, but it was really to come back to a more profound aspect of myself. And so it was to save a part of myself. I think if I hadn't done that, I would have been very depressed about the state of the world. So it was, in a way, a survival mechanism.
And the living conditions out there were very tough too.
They were tough, but actually, when I walk around London, I think it's tougher. If you know what I mean. It's tougher in the sense that people have to deal with the outside is easier, but the inside is tougher. But people don't realize how tough it is inside, because there is so much on the outside that distracts them from really seeing what's going on. And the native people, the inside is so easy, but the outside is much harder. So it's, you know, it's not as tough as it sounds in the book. That's just, it's easy. You know, when you live there, you don't think of anything else. You don't think of the
It's easy
snakes.
if you can accept, like
Of
you
course,
obviously did,
of course, yeah.
and you kind of fell into their way of living.
Of course, if you have resistance, it's, you know, then you are in total separation to what is going on, and you I don't think you would last more than a few days.
Because you were actually travelling from village to village
Towards
by
the end.
canoe,
Yes, yes.
and you would wait sometimes up to a week for the next canoe,
Yes.
like,
It's the
you know,
only
like
way.
London bus. I don't know
Do you
if
wait
it's
a
like you
week?
wait a week and then all the buses come at once. But so you were really on a journey without a time frame, weren't you?
Totally, and that's possible in South America because, you know, everything is, you know, built that way. You have a hammock, and you can put up your hammock anywhere. Do you know, there is this sense of people look after you. Do you know, it's a community sense. So, do you know, everyone who has a house lets you sleep in their house. You don't have to pay. I mean, it's nice to pay money, but it's a way of helping each other. And so it's easy to travel, and you just do a little bit of work, or you pay a little bit of money, and it's so easy. So there is not that sense of you have to do everything in 1 week. You know, you have to go here and there and everywhere in 1 week. You know, time changes, and you don't even realize. You don't have a watch. You know, you don't realize. You know, the time is measured by sunset, sunrise, and so it's a whole different world, and it's a very interesting world. You know, I can understand why the native people find it very difficult to come into, you know, the more modern society, because, you know, here time is so specific, and there it's a much more, you follow much more the rhythms of nature than, you know, a watch.
And you had a very important experience, which
Yes.
we were talking before the interview started, seemed to be quite a transformational experience. Do you want to
Yes.
just talk about that?
Yes, it's difficult to talk about because, you know, such an experience is so profound. Sometimes, yeah, I write poetry, and sometimes I find poetry can create a feeling which is much closer to the experience than words. But basically, my whole world fell apart. You know, what I believed to be a physical structure within myself just was totally destroyed. And this, in shamanism, this is called, you know, a death experience. So it's like a little death. So it's almost like what happens to everyone. We all die at one point, at least in the physical sense. And everything that you believe and you hold on to becomes, it's put out there, and you have to really face it. Your physical body, your attachment to your physical body, your mind, your emotions. So it was very strong because, you know, it was a whole experience in such a short moment.
But you felt a oneness, it was saying in
the beginning,
book.
no.
Yeah,
In the
didn't?
beginning,
Okay.
no. In the beginning, fear.
Okay.
And the fear of letting go, you know, the fear of disintegrating into this sense of oneness. It wasn't very long, but the fear was very strong. And I think this is what we all feel, perhaps, you know, before death. You know, the fear of, I'm not sure where I'm going, so, you know, you want to hold back a little bit because of the unknownness of going into that space. But the power of the transformation that was going on meant that I couldn't hold on to the fear forever. I had to keep going, and then the experience of oneness happened, because actually it's, I believe this is what happens during the physical aspect of death, that, you know, once you let go, that it's actually quite nice. You know, it's not that, you know, the fear is just a mental projection of what you think might happen, but actually when you have the experience, it's quite nice, and then there is this sense of oneness. And from that sense of oneness, I could understand, you know, the beauty of our connection to everything, to the elements, to the trees, to the universe. And I would say you know, this is what people write about or have spoken about in the past, this to be like a little enlightenment, you know,
So
or
it's a
satori,
glimpse, yeah.
a glimpse into
Yeah.
another reality which we never really access because the mind doesn't allow us to get to that point. And, you know, when the mind disintegrates, you know, you have to go into the space that you are normally living in the real space that you're normally living in. I don't believe we live in the mind or the emotions. I just believe that to be aspects of ourselves. Believe there is a core, and so you go to the core.
And do you find that this, you say it's a glimpse of experience, do you feel that has deepened as the years have gone by?
Totally. That meant that I didn't have fear, which is, you know, one of the main, you know, main problems that most people have. I believe we have fear and this sense of low self-esteem. So the fear doesn't have to be very specific. I'm frightened of scorpions or snakes. It can be much more vague, but, you know, it really creates this sense of the ego wanting to be in control. So fear usually results in you wanting to control the situation in a much more obvious way. So then it creates a certain way of thinking, a certain way of being, masks, programs meaning ways of interacting with people, and a furthering away from what is natural inside of you. So when that fear is not there, there is no reason to maintain those structures because it's useless. So
you were feeling the structures gradually
totally
fall away.
Totally, and
so what did you feel? What was revealed as the structures fell away?
Well,
a big question,
that's a big question.
But I'm really interested.
Yes. I think to you know shorten the answer, I think slowly you come back to what I call the heart, which is what Rumi, you know, the poet, wrote about.
Yeah.
And you come back to not just the personal heart, but more the heart of all life. But it's a journey, you know, it's not like everything happens at once, you know, there is realizations here, realizations there, but the consciousness, the reference point of your consciousness is not based on fear or ego, you know, it's based on that opening that is happening. So, you know, you experience a much more profound, intimate relationship to everything in life. And because it's enjoyable, you know, it's always enjoyable to go more deep, then I think you never think of going back. You know, you're just moving, you move more into that space of opening up, letting go more of whatever mundane ego thoughts that, you know, usually entertain the mind. So it's like a relationship where you just go deeper and deeper.
Tony, when you have these mundane ego thoughts, to use your words there, that entertain the mind, is there an awareness of not going with those thoughts, or is it that those thoughts just don't even arise?
In the beginning, there is an awareness not to go with those thoughts.
So you make a decision, something deeper makes a decision.
Exactly, something
not deeper. To go there.
Yeah, because if you don't know, you don't make a decision, you just go there because that's what has to happen. Yeah. But if you know, then there is the energy which is moved away from fear now can be used in a very disciplined way to go and be clear where to go so that you don't get caught up. So it's not a battle, but it's more about intention, you know, of do I need to go into that space anymore? Why do I need to be there? You know, because you see it more clearly. You know, why should I go there? And then
it's like an intelligence arises.
Exactly, a universal intelligence. That is what is interesting. You know, the universal intelligence within you begins to guide you and decides, you know, a more useful way of being in the world than ignorance.
So we only actually have about 10 minutes left. So and I know that was also being in the Amazon was incredible catalyst, because you learned a lot about shamanic healing and herbs and energy, and that is what you do in your life now. So just tell us a little bit about your work now these days, how you incorporated not only what you've learnt practically, but also what has happened energetically and transformationally in you.
Okay. That's another big question, so I'll be a little bit brief. I have no doubt that what I need to do in the world is work with people, and I love working with people, and I love, the being there in the same way that many people have been present to me in my life and in my spiritual journey. So my whole life is dedicated to teaching meditation, but in a very specific way. So even though the book is about shamanism, I learned a lot about shamanism, and I use various techniques of shamanism, but I incorporate those into a very specific way of meditating, and I use specific mantras, which are sounds, sacred sounds, to come back to this sense of oneness, because I believe that by doing that, by me working with people and guiding people to do this, that we change the whole world completely, because it's one person can make a big difference for everyone. And so, if I work with 100 people or 200 people, I believe that changes the reality that we're facing in this moment. So my work is eclectic. I use my experience from the Zen Buddhist monastery, from the Amazon forest, from the Andes, but it's very specific. I've created a format which couldn't be, an anthropologist wouldn't term what I do as purely shamanic. It would be much more about understanding the sense of oneness with everything in the world. And so a lot of my work is, now every Wednesday I do what is called satsang. I use Sanskrit words because, English doesn't have the possibility of explaining what it means. And I explain various topics in a way where the perception of that topic is from oneness rather than just from psychology or from, judgment or from ego. So, for example, I like to talk about relationships because I feel they're very important, or children, or the environment, but from a different perspective. So that meditation isn't just sitting quietly, in a room and closing your eyes and meditating for 20 minutes, but how to put that into practice in London, in the Amazon forest, in the mountains, in Germany, in wherever you are. How can a modern human being, in civilization, use these spiritual wisdoms in everyday life, in a practical sense?
You remind me of one of my favourite terms, is being man in the world but not of the world. Somehow yes. You're in the marketplace,
exactly.
but you're not distracted
exactly.
by all the dramas of the marketplace.
And the marketplace can be an interesting place.
It's fascinating, I agree. Yeah.
There's no need to, run away from it.
So do you feel the process ongoing in you in terms of, or do you feel you've...
It sounds a little bit egotistical if you say, yes, I feel that I've reached the point of completeness. And anyone who says that, I don't really know if that can be the total truth, because I believe a human being can never reach the point of completeness, because we are very specific, in the physical form at least, we're very specific. So I believe there is the opening to the divine, but we can only relate to the divine in a human way. So we're always learning, and when we stop learning, then we can't exist here in this physical realm. So even the most enlightened people like Buddha, I believe they still had moments of learning, perhaps in a different way, but moments of learning. So I don't believe anyone ever stops. I had an experience at 27, which was, I would call, an enlightening experience, a profound enlightening experience, but that wasn't the end. That was just the beginning.
Yeah. And it is this process of integration, isn't it? That is...
Exactly.
It's so important, because something can happen, but we still have a life to live as human beings.
And that's what I love. As a human being, You can do so many things. You can get married, you can have children, you can work, and you can integrate all the wisdom in all aspects of life. You don't have to be specific, sitting in a monastery, which is wonderful, but you know, that's not the only way. And that's why I'm so interested in being in the world, teaching, you know, in London, teaching in wherever, you know, big city, because I find it's important to share in that way, you know, in those spaces.
You just mentioned marriage, and of course we should just clear this up, that you made the vow of celibacy at 18, and then obviously something happened a few years later.
Something happened, yeah, and I just realised that, you know, if you find the right person, you know, it's not a problem to be in a relationship, because then, like anything, there is a support, and I found the right person.
Yeah, but it's wonderful you kept the vow until you found the right person.
Yeah. And it took a while.
Yes,
and
but the discipline in that is tremendous for a young, healthy male who's
who likes
a very attractive-looking young, healthy male. Yeah,
yes. It's easy. You know, I think when you're determined, you don't have another option. You know, you just want to follow through your feeling, you know, of determination. So that becomes, you know, in itself a support. In the beginning, maybe it's difficult. It was difficult in the beginning, but you know, once you're doing what you need to do, you just do it.
I get the feeling now that maybe your determination is less personal.
It is,
and it's
you're
more.
right.
I don't know if there's such a phrase as as a universal determination, but it's more.
Yes.
It's more in that way.
I'm told that my life is much more easygoing. As a younger person, I was very disciplined in what I did and very methodical. Now I'm easygoing. But I'm very disciplined. I work. Yeah. I still sleep only 3 or 4 hours, and I work all the time. Family, or books, or whatever.
Wow. So for someone that was quite sick as a child, you really found balance.
Yeah, I'm not sick anymore, and I think the miracle of following your heart, you know, changes everything, even the physical structure.
Yeah. Tony, I really appreciate you coming along and talking to us at Conscious TV.
Thank you.
It's been fascinating to hear your story. Thank you. And I'd like to recommend Tony's book, Shaman's Wisdom, which is very much about his work, and then the book written about him by Nomi Sharon, which is half about his work and also half his story, which is really fascinating. And thank you for watching Conscious TV, and I hope we'll see you again soon. Goodbye.